What happened? Wow. Yeah, like everything reset on my broadcast software. That stunk. Man, 50 minutes. That was a record, and we were embodying the voice of Joe the whole time. What a shame. There's like a pixel count cut off on my graphics card where if I'm like running too many frames at the same time, it just locks up.
Too many shady shaders.
Yeah, too many shady shading shaders. Anyway, I don't know where we left off. Back up, says Twig.
That was me.
Just pop this out real quick. Goodness. Okay, so essentially a bunch of students were protesting Jordan Peterson when he went to speak at McMaster University, and these students which complain about them being respected as individuals with strange hello?
No one's here.
It says 5 watching.
It says 3 watching.
Oh.
Good to know. That happens. I hope it's under the same stream.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Is it under the same stream?
I'm gonna try it.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Good. Anyway, hello. Sorry about that. Technical issues. I have to fix that. So Jordan Peterson was protested by a bunch of students who had a giant flag with a hammer and sickle on it.
Nice.
They literally had a communist flag.
Oh, was it red?
Do you know how ridiculous? A hammer and sickle.
Yeah.
Do you know how ridiculous that was?
A picture of a hammer and sickle. There's
really? You think there's a different reason they have a hammer and sickle? They're like the farmers workers union who are like, nah, I'm corn kin.
Why not?
No. They were pro-socialist, and they're just like, well, there's no socialist flag. Stupid 4 words and curse words at him, and beating pots and pans and making absolutely no sort of intelligent argument whatsoever, specifically as individuals. It's ironic that they have
subjective.
This. They weren't making an argument.
Oh.
They weren't. They were just saying sexist, racist, POS. Chanting it over and over and over again in the room he's trying to have his discussion in.
Right.
Banging literally pots and pans. They're throwing a temper tantrum because you don't want to play my make-believe game. The floor is lava, dang it.
Was it effective?
Don't tell me
Did it work?
No, because Jordan Peterson is smarter than they are.
He had a bigger pot and pan.
So much smarter. Yeah, and he was just bashing people. No, he eventually, when he told everybody in the audience, he's like, stay calm. What they're doing, they're like allowed to do. It's not nice. It's rude. It's disruptive. But like, we don't need to like fight them with. He's talking very normal. As best he can. And then eventually they went outside, and like the people who wanted to hear him like stood around him in a circle, and he was like up on a table like shouting to them in the quad or whatever, trying to like give his speech while around that circle of people. Still no stream. Refresh it. How does she still not have a stream? Tell her to refresh her window.
Amor has it. Eckerd does not.
Tell him to refresh his stream. So yeah, and then they still were out there around the circle chanting and calling him horrible names and screaming and yelling and things like that. But he wasn't even there. He wasn't even there to say, this is ridiculous. Don't call people by their made-up gender pronouns. He isn't even saying, don't call people by their made-up gender pronouns. He's saying, you can't tell me the words I have to say. You can't make me say things that are made up and make believe, and words I don't agree with and don't believe in.
All words are made up, though.
No.
All words are made up.
There's a lot of footage. Go find all the footage you can of him talking about this. There's a lot of interviews online. No, all words are not made up and then put into law that other people have to accept them in their vocabulary. Like if these caught on naturally and people were just using them without a second thought, they just sort of, well, yeah, that's just what we do. That's what we do. And it was normal. And the only issue people had with it was because people were being, saying mean things to people like they do with slurs these days, currently. But stop doing that. But yeah, language is not dictated by the government saying this is a new word and you have to use it. You have to use it. What if there's suddenly slightly?
How is that dangerous?
Example.
Do you care that much?
Because it sets a precedent, not necessarily about this, But what happens
It's
when
about
we
the principle.
What happens when we for some reason some like closet Scientologist becomes president and is just like, I decree by proclamation that everybody when they enter a school classroom or something has to say, praise L. Ron Hubbard, Master and King, and then like goes sits down or whatever. Like compelled speech is ridiculous. It's like way back to, you have to call the king your highness and you can't turn your back on him and you have to bow. It's that kind of thing. You have to take this very seriously, and if you don't, then we're going to take action against you. That's the problem with compelling people to do things like that. You have to agree with my made up sense of self. Identity is not a subjective thing. Identity is something that happens socially between two people. Like, you are not the one.
I don't have an identity unless there's somebody there to witness it.
No, but your identity is not only described by you. Everyone can think you're a jerk, and they're allowed to think, this guy's a jerk.
Yeah,
and you can't go, no. That is not my identity.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it kind of is, because hypothetically, because hypothetically a person acts this way. Other people are allowed to say, yeah, part of your identity, you are dishonest, you promise things in your dealings with other people that you don't follow through on, you're very mean, you're sarcastic. These are parts of your identity that other people are allowed to ascribe to you. It's part of a social thing, and if you don't like it, tough, be nicer to people. You can't demand people respect your disrespect toward them, because that's just who I am. How many times have you heard people be like, well, I mean, I'm just that way. Like, you have to deal with my bad sense of humor. Way too often. Do you want it to be law that you have to respect these people? You have to invite him to your party, or that's discrimination. I don't like him. He's a jerk. Whoa. You can't call him a jerk. That's the problem. This is setting a precedent that people can identify themselves as made up things that they are not, that other people are forced to respect it and to pretend.
Well, I think the legislators' hearts are in the right place, so it's fine.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, just like with the...
they intend to save people struggle.
Just like with the Patriot Act. If ever there was a title to try and get conservatives to be okay with something, it's the Patriot Act. You're a patriot, right?
Yeah.
Vote. You think the Patriot Act's a good thing, you know?
Oh, man.
Well, I mean, George Bush, his heart was in the right place. Somebody sent me a quote from George Napolitano. No, George Napolitano? George Bush.
Judge Napolitano.
Judge Napolitano saying
Judge
that
George
you wouldn't give the Patriot Act kind of powers to, Bush's predecessor, who was Bill Clinton, or one of his successors, possibly.
You're ruining it.
Yep.
You're destroying it.
Hey,
it was a dank quote, and here we go.
Dank. Bring it up. Read it.
I'm going to. I'm doing it right now.
I thought I had that on lock. I read it twice.
On lock, he says.
John Locke.
Yes.
What? Oh.
No.
Oh, it's kind of long, but Judge Napolitano, here we go. Many of my fellow conservatives have welcomed reposing this kind and amount of power into President Bush's hands. He is a good man, they tell me, big-hearted, clear-headed, modest, honest, and trustworthy. I, too, believe he is. But we are a nation of laws, not men, and no president is president forever. Would my friends agree to have given these king-like powers to President Bush's predecessor, or to one of his successors, especially if she has the same last name as the predecessor?
Bam. Referring, of course, to Barack Obama and Michelle. Right.
Perhaps.
Did I get that right?
I don't think so.
No, probably not. So, yeah, that's why I think that he is right, and this is a dangerous precedent to set, because you can apply this to a lot of different things.
Whoa. You're not allowed to call it a dangerous precedent.
Specifically,
and for that, you're on the list.
Something that, you're transphobic. And so there's so much transphobia going around, and there's so much hate speech towards trans people that we need to write it into law that hate speech towards trans people is against the law. What about hate speech towards, like, what about outlawing Islamophobia? Islamophobia is illegal. What does that even mean? Islamophobia. Well, transphobia is illegal now. You can't act in a transphobic manner.
I don't know, kind of like how the civil rights acts of the 50s and 60s.
And Islam is an actual thing. like it's an accepted group of people that the world has come to respect and understand as, well, that's a group of people in a belief, as opposed to made up gender pronouns. So, like I said, it sets a weird precedent. Canada passed a motion, M103, I think it was. Where's that at? M103 saying that the government needs to look into. That was on my phone. It's not my computer. Saying they need to look into Islamophobia in Canada, and that we need to do a study to figure out where it comes from and how we can stop it.
Good.
And people are saying, well,
the government destroying more.
Well,
hate.
they said,
That's what I
well,
like.
they said the government shouldn't, be making laws about this kind of thing, and the proponents of it say this isn't a law. This isn't a law. It's a motion, and it just says we need to study this and look into it. But what the motion actually says, and I read it in full, is that we need to look into this and we need to study it so that we can figure out what policies to enact to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they just passed a motion saying, that the government needs to look into why there is so much Islamophobia and hate crimes towards Islam and towards Muslims, and then they need to make policy that will stop that from happening. Not saying what that policy looks like.
Yeah, okay.
You could say the exact same thing about transphobia.
You got to start somewhere. You got to.
They started with gender pronouns, and they go, well, now you are compelled to say this.
Well, can you imagine
is where
the
this
trouble we
argument
could have
ended.
averted if they had done a study on transphobia before they passed this legislation?
Would've
We'd
turned
be
out the same
miles.
way.
Canada
Would've turned
would be
out the
miles
same way.
ahead.
You still would have had people going on Netflix shows and saying, scientists now think, and that's their entire basis for the argument. Now they want some legal precedent behind it to point to the study and go, somebody did this study. I'm not pointing at you. I'm pointing at the study.
Good.
Somebody did this study, and that's why this law needs to take place. And it could end in the exact same way. We need to combat Islamophobia by even less of a precedent of forced speech. Just, you're not allowed to make fun of Muhammad. That could be a law. You cannot draw Muhammad. Like, that's ridiculous to say there are people that you're not allowed to make representations of. That's not as ridiculous as you have to use this person's made-up gender pronouns. That is
a law,
less
right?
ridiculous.
In Muslim countries, that is a law, though, right?
It's part of Sharia law, yes, which is based on a religion. Whatever happened to separation of church and state?
Well, I don't know. Our founders were religious. There was Christian influences on them.
I'm just saying. There is no basis in science for the whole gender pronouns, gender spectrum thing.
Which science, though?
The
Your
science of feelings.
My science?
There's
There's a spectrum of sciences.
Science is when you study something and you record data and then you report your findings accurately according to the best data. That is not what's happened about this. So this is what people are believing, but it's not scientifically sound. How is that different from a religion? There's no scientific basis for it, but we have to respect it because of hurt feelings. What is the number one favorite protected group right now that you can't hurt their feelings?
Trans, gay, black women.
Not all Muslims.
Oh.
How you can't say that any terrorism is linked at all. And now, who knows? Next thing you know, it could be law that you can't say radical Muslim terrorists or radical Islam or jihad.
But it's likely that every white male is a member of this slimy patriarchy, correct?
Every male in general.
It's likely, though. I mean, you may be an exception.
Based on the science of feelings.
But based on the news stories I've seen, most men belong to the patriarchy and abuse that power.
That is 100% accurate.
That's what I found.
You need. I'm sorry, but you need to slather a little thicker the barbecue sauce of sarcasm because some people might think you're serious and you believe these things.
Okay.
In fact, I do, and I'm just hoping you're sarcastic. Okay,
It's like wrong.
Let's see. John Locke said something like, "Language is the great bond that holds society together." Amor Pizza says it might have been Locke. Socrates probably said something like it too. Possibly even Plato. Who knows?
Yeah,
Possibly.
I feel like that's not a Locke anymore. I feel like you're just, it could have been Tolstoy. I'm not really sure.
Could have been Peterson. Leave it to Canada to pass a law solely based on sorry. We didn't mean to hurt your feelings. That is hilariously stereotypical of Canada. The law now says you have to say I'm sorries and my apology every time you. Let's see. Should we bring this stereotype into the argument? Absolutely. What if Canada identified as USA? They'd be smarter to do so. Haha, that is quite stereotype. A lot of countries see U.S. citizens as obese. I identify as obese.
What if we passed a law that required a fine be paid anytime somebody was described as a deplorable? Or any comparably insulting phrase or term.
Or like a Nazi.
Nazi.
It's legal to punch a Nazi because you're preventing the kind of harm that Nazis do. Twig says the worst conceivable government would be by philosophers. They botch every natural process with theory. Their ability to make speeches and multiply ideas is precisely the sign of their incapacity for action. Will Durant, Our Oriental Heritage is what that's from. Is that a book?
That is
a blog?
A volume. It's a volume of books.
Oof. Sorry, for some reason I was thinking a volume is a single in a set of books.
Well,
I guess that is Our Oriental Heritage. I don't know.
He has written many volumes in A Story of Civilization.
I'm trying to think if there's a word other than that, and I don't think there is. So, Amor says she loves that quote. It's interesting to look at the inverse of this. Remember the USA and how they treated anybody associated with communism?
Yep.
I can see this turning out like that. It already is. It's exactly what we're talking about. And we talked, like a month ago about the riots in Berkeley because people felt justified to enact violence on people they disagreed with because their ideology was dangerous, which it isn't. It provably, palpably is false that their doctrines in and of themselves are dangerous and violent toward people. But it didn't matter. People felt justified in enacting violence upon them, and that turned into what that was. So, I'm gonna start putting one topic of discussion for the evening. I really was hoping to just kind of like, all right, here's the deal. Here's why it's important. Everybody should pay attention to this and follow this closer because of these reasons. But it was more lively than that. That was me. Okay. Why is it always Frank texting me during this? Stop it. I'm sorry. Okay. Put that down. All right. So I guess we'll save those other topics for a different time. I appreciate you guys jumping in on the chat. It was nice to have commentary and pulling up of Duran and possibly Socrates and possibly Plato. We don't know.
Possibly any thinker.
John Locke.
Or John Locke. I don't know. Isn't John Locke the guy from Lost? It's John Locke, right?
Dang.
Isn't it?
That's John?
That's what I thought you were talking about at first. No, of course I'm not as educated as I ought to be anyway. So, all right. Well, that is
Word of the day.
Bring up the word of the day, quick. What is it? You got 50 seconds. I'm 100% serious.
I had a word. What was it?
Oh, abjure. A-B-J-U-R-E. A-B-J-U-R-E. Abjure.
Abjure. To renounce upon oath. To forswear. To disavow. To renounce or reject with some levity. To recant. To abandon forever. To reject. Repudiate. To abjure allegiance to a prince. Or to abjure errors.
Nice. That's our word of the day. We'll see you guys next Thursday at 9 o'clock. Goodbye.